This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. I think it's safe to say there's a lot of conflict going on in our world right now, and anything that'll help us understand and deal with it has got to be a step in the right direction. Am I right? So listen up to this very interesting perspective and some great advice in the book From Orphan to Police Officer, from the most unlikely man to become a cop I have ever met.
My name is Dwayne McNeil, and I'm a retired police officer. I spent 32 years in law enforcement, and I wrote a book titled From Orphan to Police Officer, and it was for a couple of different reasons. One is to kind of chronicle my life's journey to show that, especially in policing, people would always say, being a white police officer, I couldn't relate to people who are a minority because I've never been in their shoes. Well, my parents abandoned my 5 other siblings and myself when we were all young children, and we were wards of the Memphis Juvenile Court. And I lived in sheltered homes, foster homes, group homes, children's homes, shelter homes, detention centers. And when I was in the 9th grade, I was kicked out of a children's home in Nashville, Tennessee, and sent back to Memphis and lived in a shelter home. It was all black children. Went to Humes Junior High, which was black school. So I was one of 2 whites in the 9th grade. And in 10th grade year, I went to Northside High School, which was a black school as well. And so although I was white, I lived in an environment where I was a minority. And it was eye-opening. When I was 16, my aunt, who never married, never had children, took me in and was my legal guardian in Gulfport, Mississippi. My senior year, we were state champions in football. I played center on the football team. Was fortunate to get a scholarship to go to Mississippi State University. And I had a black roommate, Richard Blackmore, who went on to play a dozen or so years in the NFL. It was the first time in Mississippi State history that a black and a white had ever roomed together. And then after I finished college, I got a degree in social work and corrections, wound up in Austin, Texas, and went on to spend 29 years there, rose up to the rank of commander, which is the highest rank you can test through. So I had an opportunity to move up through the ranks, have a lot of experience in dealing with different people. And there were different things in that journey that made me want to write a book. One was I realized a lot of people, when they got to the end of their police career and retired, they took all that institutional knowledge, all that experience with them. So part of my deal was just to encourage other people who retire to take their best practices, lessons learned, even mistakes made or things that they would, recommend not doing in police work so the profession could be a better profession. And especially in today's environment, we're painted with a broad brush. I say law enforcement is the most scrutinized occupation of any occupation in the world. And when somebody messes up, like if a white officer shoots a black person, that gets media coverage for days, weeks, even months. There's rioting across the United States. But what always puzzled me in police work was that when a black kills a black, there's no outcry. There's no rioting. There's no cry for justice. There's no protesting. There's no rioting and destroying buildings, marches all across the United States saying, we need to end this. Because the bottom line is when a person is killed, regardless of whose hands they're killed, a life is taken. And why wouldn't we value every life the same? And I try to convey that in my book. And also that crime is like a cancer. It spreads. If you don't aggressively address it and deal with it, then it comes back to haunt you. And that's what's going to happen in today's world. They want to defund the police, chastise and ridicule the police and make the police the enemy. And what happens is the police officers are going to shut down because, believe me, there's some bad apples in policing, and they need to be weeded out. And there's some bad things that have happened in recent times, and there's people that have lost their lives that shouldn't have lost their lives. But on the flip side, police officers are dealing with people that are under the influence of drugs, that have mental illnesses, that are criminals, and they're, when it's time for them to go to jail, they're going to fight to the end because they don't want to lose their freedom. I tell in my book, you deal with good people under bad circumstances and bad people being themselves. And so, it's a very negative environment, policing is. And, when I finished the book, I said, what would really be great is that if somebody could be the repository for taking feedback from police officers that retire all across the world and take their feedback on best ideas, best practices. And just to give you one example, one thing that I used to do when I was out on the streets and I was a supervisor is every now and then you'd run across people that were very emotionally charged, and part of their demeanor in your interactions with them is that they would be screaming, where you could hear them 3 blocks away. And I would always get in front of them, right in front of their face, and I would start whispering. And they would go, and after a while they're screaming, right? But they're also looking at you, and they're seeing your lips move, but they can't hear what you're saying. And they go, "Officer, what are you saying?" And I would go, "Well, I'm just trying to let you know I'm not 3 blocks away. I can hear everything you're saying." Well, instead of that making that a confrontation, because the confrontation would be is me trying to outshout them, and then they would be outshouting me, and then all of a sudden things go bizarre because you're trying to compete against each other. Well, what I would do by doing that, people would look at me and I'd say that, and they would start laughing, right? And their whole demeanor. So instead of it being a confrontation, it wound up being a good encounter, a positive encounter where you broke down that divisiveness and you created a bond where you could talk and deal with the situation, but not be the source of the problem.
Right. I couldn't agree more, Dwayne. I think you should be talking to police departments across the country. Thank you. Working in higher education finance in the Dallas area, John D. Richmond's inspiration every single day is his son, who motivated him to create a symbol of hope and triumph over inconceivable odds in his book, Savant.
My 8.5-year-old autistic son, I kind of see him as having kind of a superpower, and I want him to be able to utilize it and, make the best of his little world. And I wanted a character that could, take autism and make something really great out of it. People often associate autism as being a disability, and technically it is, but it's also, I wanted to portray it as a superpower, as something that he can take and utilize to the best of his ability. So that's kind of where my character was built. So the character's name is Michael Avery. The book begins when he's about 8 years old, same age my son is right now. And one night he witnesses his father's murder basically right in front of him. The case goes cold. And then it jumps forward 15 years. Michael has become a law enforcement agent, hell-bent on trying to get into a position where he can go solve his father's cold case. Michael struggles definitely in social communication, which is very common with kiddos and adults on the spectrum. They don't understand social norms. They often don't understand humor, especially inside jokes and things like that. Michael also encounters a love interest, and he just has no idea how to deal with this situation. Dating is a foreign concept to him. So this story is about triumph over the evil that was done to his father, but also over some of Michael's personal struggles with his autism.
Well, he finds a way to live in a society where he's the guy that's different, he's the guy that sticks out, but he manages to become a part of everything that's going on around him.
Not only live, but flourish and succeed. And that's one thing I tell people all the time is this will not be an excuse for my son. I want him to succeed. Success may look a little differently for my son than it does most other people, but I want him to be a success. This is not going to be a crutch. It's not going to be something he can just sit at home and let the world pass him by. He's going to succeed. We just need to find out what he's really good at and nurture it as his parents and nurture it. And that's kind of what Michael is. He was definitely patterned after my son.
And he's got an amazing memory.
Yeah, so he's got not only eidetic memory, but perfect recall. He's seeing pictures of the actual item in his mind, and this is hard for people to wrap their head around, having eidetic memory as well as perfect recall. Not only be able to see something, but then to take a document, being able to actually redraw that years later in perfect detail. That's what Michael is able to do. So he basically, what he does is he spends his entire childhood through early adulthood just collecting evidence around his father's murder in his mind that later on down the line he will be able to perfectly recall and get down on paper and run his own investigation without having any of the documents that the police and everybody else has at their disposal. And Michael has a bit of a mischievous side. Whenever all the police are coming in and out of the house, whenever they're talking to his mom's actually a very attractive woman. So some of the police officers are a little interested in her. Michael's over there looking over their shoulder at their documents and peeking through their documents, and he'll be able to recall that in a couple of decades whenever he gets his opportunity.
Wow, excellent. So are you able to do any promotion for this book?
Yes, I've had many book signings. I did a couple of book signings at Barnes and Noble or in the Texas, Oklahoma area. I guess that's almost a year ago.
Right.
And I also did a couple of autism symposiums, because the purpose of this book is not just to write a fiction story. It's to give people hope. Hey, you know what? My kiddo may be a little different, but they're different. They're not less. So, these kiddos can do anything and everything that their typically developing peers can. They just might need a little help along the way. So that's my book's twofold: to entertain and inform at the same time.
All right, John, thank you. Most of us can't begin to imagine what it's like to be an immigrant trying to assimilate into American culture. Well, Francis Ashun gives us a window and a lot to think about in his book, A Chronicle of the Life of an Immigrant in the U.S.
Originally from Ghana, it's located in West Africa. Live in Mammoth Junction in New Jersey. I do work for New Jersey State Department of Health, Department of Human Services. I'm a contract administrator. So prior to transitioning from Ghana to the United States, I had a lot of expectations. And then contrary to my expectation upon arrival, I was met with a totally different reception. And so I guess it was a culture shock to me, and so I'd had to sort of assimilate into a different culture. And so the problems that ensued in my quest for assimilating into the culture is something that I decided to kind of share my story with not just the immigrant population, but by extension, non-immigrant, to kind of have an idea or an insight as to some of the challenges or struggles that immigrants have to face, and how I was able to adapt and thus transcend some of the barriers that face many immigrants today. I think one of the problems that stands out has to do with your accent, people not understanding you, and it can be very frustrating. Your ability not to climb up the social ladder because of your accent or your skin color or a variety of other factors. And it can be very frustrating, but I never in my life allow any of these perceived obstacles to stifle my progress. And so my book kind of encapsulates some of these experiences. And so anyone who is willing, able to read it will be motivated and inspired by my experience, knowing very well that in the face of obstacles in life, that one can triumph at the end of the day. For instance, I've had several job opportunities, and then I could tell the interviewer was very impressed with my resume, and then just upon setting eyes on me and seeing me as a person, I thought this person is Francis was like supposed to be a woman or something else. Right away, I mean, there's this individual's perception about me is already colored by the fact that it's my appearance did not coincide with their expectation. That's one point. And then I had to work as a security guard and then attend college, my first degree. Anytime I was given an assignment, the assignment is always given to people who are from either the third world country or people who looked down upon as pariahs. I used to work, that was in the late 80s, at a place called Harlem. At the time, it was very rough neighborhood. And so the security guard will always, an American would always assign me to places that are not so safe. And I've always have to wonder why, but then invariably it becomes obvious to me that his reason for doing that was influenced by the fact that I'm an immigrant and I don't have a say in the matter. And more often than not, I don't complain. I'm the kind of person who always I'm very much in compliance with directives. That and the other experiences that I've encountered personally. No human being should be subjected to something of that nature, but I'm a firm believer in God, and so I always trust that at His own time He would take me out of that situation. So every situation I've been exposed to is a learn experience for me. It's a lesson for me, and I do the best in that situation, and I don't stay in that situation forever. So that's why I wrote this book. It's a detailed chronicle of my struggle and how I was able to transcend those barriers.
Well, good for you, Francis. You really are an inspiration. All right, we got to take a quick break, but we're coming right back. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
You're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. As a licensed counselor and therapist in Ohio, Barbara Vetter noticed a lot of patients are very dismissive of their emotions. She found she was using similar visual aids and materials over and over again in relation to emotional understanding. And that's what inspired her to write Renewed Mind: How to Navigate Opposing Forces.
So emotions are very intangible. Our mind is something that we don't see, but feelings and emotions are very powerful, and they also have a timid side. Emotions have to feel safe in order to come forward. So I wrote the book as a precursor to conversation. You find stories of individuals that have had tough experiences in their lives, and in some cases very traumatic and hurtful experiences, that have felt defeated and discouraged, even rejected. So Dana had worked at an office with other people who she considered were very messy in the common room. And she began to be overwhelmed and frustrated and felt like she was cleaning the common room and nobody else was helping. So she got herself so distressed and anxious that she ended up coming in to talk. And we found out that there was a deeper issue of her distress about the common room. And in the book, I get into what that deeper issue was. But she felt tremendous burden relief just for being listened to and understanding that there was connections to her frustration and her overwhelm. And it wasn't all related to messiness of the other coworkers, although she was stuck and felt that that was her issue.
That happens all the time, though, doesn't it? Like we get stressed out about something that's not even related to what's really the underlying cause.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She was just transformed through the 4 steps that I use in the book.
What are the 4 steps?
The first step is to find the internal stress. Find your inner self, because we have protective modes that we put up to protect the pain. And the next step, it's examining the emotional pain, because what I found is pain revealed can create insecurity. So spending time examining the pain and feeling safe with your own internal emotions, not dismissing. So we're learning to read the messages within our emotions. And then you make friends with your emotions, and then you can surrender the core pain.
Can you do this by yourself?
Yes. I'm already getting many testimonies from people that have read the book and have taken the steps and done the work and faced conflict. And it doesn't always have to be trauma. It can just be conflict with another person or conflict within. And it's kind of intangible, but I do make it very tangible, and I have a companion workbook that goes with it.
Nice. So you kind of chart your conflict. And as I said in the beginning of the show, no shortage of conflict this year, right? Thanks, Barbara. Hildegard is the oldest of 5 from a little town surrounded by Slovenia and bordered by Croatia. It is in this little town her story, My Other Life, Childhood in Goci, Slovenia, begins.
What inspired me was my youth that is so much different from today. And it was from the day I was born to the day we left Lienfeld, Koche. That was in 1941, before World War II.
So you left Slovenia right before World War II?
Yes, from the day I was born to the day we were moved. We lived in a town as a farming. My father was a farmer, agriculturist, and I too was part of all this. Even though I was young, it was a matter of tradition that the children work on the farm. I think it was the way I behaved, the way I cooperated, the way we carried on life. And I, as the first of 4 children, or 5 actually, followed their tradition the way I thought it was the best, even though I negate some of the rules and regulations. And I went on my own and discovered new things, such as farming, the beautiful harvest that I worked with the children, such as dancing in sauerkraut with a barrel. When we were harvesting the sauerkraut and shredding it, adults were bringing a bale full of sauerkraut that was shredded into the basement, and my father would put the sauerkraut into the barrel, and the children would be dancing around.
You would dance on the sauerkraut.
We were dancing to press it down, to make it hard, and my father would be salting it. When it was full, of course, we went on to another barrel, and so it went on.
Wow.
Now, the same thing with the apple. Of course, we crushed them. The message is that life itself can be lived beautifully and followed the beautiful way as it is presented to them. Simple, enjoyable, but also, of course, you have to follow the rules that were given from early age on.
Great stories, Hildy. Thank you. A disability didn't stop our next author from making her dream of writing a book come true. Check out the story of Sandy Rose.
My name is Theresa Seifert. I'm from Dunedin, Florida. I was a cosmetologist for 34 years and ran my own business for 25. I've grown up with a learning disability where it took me 14 years to get out of high school because I have a reading and spelling disability. But once I retired, I was caring for my mother, who was my best friend, and I got totally depressed. So I needed to take myself from my situation into a fantasy land. I ended up writing about twins that were conjoined. One was healthy and one wasn't. So they sacrificed the weaker one to save the bigger one. But part of the smaller one's brain got tucked into the one that survives head. And so Sandy is her name, and she grew up with a dual personality. And it follows her life through family tragedy and many bad mistakes, one after another, leads her down a path that is disastrous. She's just there looking and knowing and seeing what's happening, but not having much control except on rare occasions. And she's the one that narrates the story because she's the only one that has been there the whole time and knows the truth. So you meet many different characters that deal with drugs, judicial department. There is a murder. She's the one that commits it, but Rose, her counterpart, her twin, actually is the one with the strength that helps her decide to do this and gives her the strength to be able to do this. But she commits the murder to save her good friend. As the book goes on, she just keeps making one mistake after another that leads her down this dark path. And then at one point, she falls and hits her head, and Rose takes over. That's her counterpart. And she's named Rose because her mother planted a yellow rose of Texas at the burial site of the twin because they never really named her. So the end of the book, last quarter of the book, are the two switching back and forth.
Like a schizophrenic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and her mother was an alcoholic schizophrenic that leads to her mother going into an institution. Yeah, I could have never written this book because I still can't spell. I can read now, but I have to sound out words a lot of times. But I had to use software so I could talk into my computer and it would print it out for me. Otherwise, I never would have been able to write a book.
Well, good for you, Teresa, man. That software has been a godsend for so many people. Thank you. And we're out of time. Thanks for joining us on the Page Publishing Book Club. 710WOR.com is where you can go to download the podcast, just in case you're sitting there going, did I hear that right? You probably did. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We'll catch you next time.